Recording stuff? Yeah, excellent. And this is it's August the 19th. This is our budget work session number 2. Go through the material at the beginning. Girdwood supervises its committees and subcommittees are subject to the Alaska Open Meetings Act and found in Alaska Statute 44.62.310 and Anchorage Municipal Code 1.25. Girdwood Board of Supervisors operates under the Girdwood Public Meetings Standards of Conduct. Call the meeting to order at 5:03. Would you like to read the land acknowledgement?
I would like to. Thank you.
Brianna will read the land acknowledgement.
The Girdwood Board of Supervisors acknowledges the indigenous peoples of Alaska whose land we reside on. The community of Girdwood, situated between the areas known to be Dena'ina and Aluptic homeland, respects the people who were stewards of this land for generations. We commit to the continued stewardship of this land and are grateful to be part of a wider community that seeks to maintain a sustainable use of Girdwood Valley for present and future people.
Thank you. We will do a quick roll call. My name is Mike Edgington, co-chair and Housing and Economic Development Supervisor. And in the room we have
Brianna Sullivan, co-chair and fire department supervisor, and temporarily the public safety advisory and roads and utilities supervisor.
Brian Burnett, Parks and Rec Supervisor.
Thank you. And online?
Jennifer Wingard, Land Use Supervisor.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Okay, first of all, I'll call for a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
I move to approve the agenda as written.
Second.
Thank you. Approved and seconded. Are there any objections? If not, we'll do it by consent. Not hearing or seeing any objections. Agenda is approved. Announcements. Public is encouraged to ask questions and provide comment. Please raise your hand and wait to be acknowledged. To help discussion stay productive, please direct your comments to the board rather than other members of the public, and keep your comments focused on the business under discussion. Please be respectful of everyone's opinions. We will dive straight into the budget discussion with item number 1, GBSA budget overview. Kyle.
Sure.
Thank you.
As always do before we start these sessions, we give an overview of what the Girdwood service area tax structure looks like and where we stand within the municipality for it. So to start off, what we see here in front of you is the mill rate levy by tax district for 2024, excuse me. And this is based on our year. So this is where we compare to all the other tax districts in Anchorage. You can see there's 59 or so. There's a few numbers missing in there in certain areas, but as well over 50 different tax districts throughout Anchorage. And we are tax district 4, as you can see up here at Girdwood Valley tax district 4. And so within our tax district, we pay it area-wide like everybody else. And then we have a Girdwood mill levy, which under that Girdwood mill levy, we cover fire, police, parks and rec, and economic development, and housing and economic development funding. So we have 4 powers under there and police. Did I say that? Yeah. Sorry. And then we, like everybody else, we pay the ASD levy, which is where it is 6.67 for this year. So a total for our area is 12.3 mils there. So as you can see, we are at the lower end of the bracket for the amount of taxes that we pay compared to the other neighborhoods in Alaska, in Anchorage. And we are the lowest tax district when you compare against similar services, essential services. So as compared to everybody else who has fire, police, road maintenance. And then we're very unique with our housing and economic section, but just those 3 alone, we have the lowest tax district in the city in that aspect. So we're very efficient with what we do. Sorry, here I got to do some rotating. So this gives you kind of a breakdown. And so the first example is a 2024 property tax structure for all municipal services. And so you can see where your municipal taxes go to when you get that bill from the city. for it. And so 0.3 of it, or 2%, just over 2%, close to 2.5% of it goes to area-wide, which is unusual. Usually we actually get a rebate from area-wide. Area-wide's mostly funded by other sources like alcohol tax, fuel tax, motor, cigarette tax, rental car tax, bed tax. It usually has a surplus, and so sometimes we see actually a negative number there, so that is lessens your taxes. But this last year, we saw that area-wide bump up a little bit. And we'll look at the historical later on to see where that's been over the many years. And then the school district is the primary item that is paid out of taxes at 54% of the tax bill. And then 43% goes to the Girdwood service area and covers our services here in that aspect. So you can break down. This is an example of a tax value of a house that's over $100,000. And so you can see 240 go to area-wide, 5,000 of the $9,000 or close to $10,000 goes to Anchorage School District, and just over 4,000 will go back to the service area there for that bill. And this bill represents also getting the residential deduction exemption under that. And then you can see here, I broke it out further so you can see how it's broken down. So 33% of the Girdwood service area services go to street maintenance, 39% go to fire, 17, close to 18% go to police. This year, the new one, the Housing and Economic Development Fund, just over 1% went to funding that account. And then 11% went to Parks and Rec. We do generate a little bit fees off of our interest and other things. And so we do cut down our tax bill. And so like this year, we were able to cut down tax bill by $128,000, which, reduced our mill by just 0.15. So that was a savings of $277 for this assessment here in that aspect. So, and we usually generate that off of, we keep capital funds and we keep reserves, and they generate interest, and then we get those interest rate payments back, and that helps us to reduce things. We also generate fees through rentals and sometimes fire and things like that. So it helps to offset our taxes in that aspect. This is the estimate, and today we'll go through all the different budgets, but this is an estimate right now. This was up to date. I did get some more information this afternoon on the housing and economic development, so I need to do some plugging during the meeting to plug that in. So that will change a little bit, but you can see the differences between the two for 24 down here, the 25 in green, and where the fundings will go that we're proposing for next year in that area. So just kind of gives you a general breakdown there. Before I move on, any questions with these two charts here? A lot of numbers, a lot of Excel time. So what does your taxes pay for? So for area-wide, it pays for EMS, libraries, animal control, street and signage, treasury, legal administration, sewer highway policing, land use and right-of-way enforcement, cemetery operations, public school or public bus system, including the grants that come to the Girdwood Valley Transit. And then these are paid equally by all taxpayers and provided throughout the municipality. And like I said, in recent years, we've seen strong revenues with our other taxing sources. So we usually saw a rebate in this area, but this year we do see it being taxed for 24. And that may not be the same for 25, just depending on how well tourism works. Sometimes those things really dictate it. Anchorage School District, it pays for all the school services within the municipality throughout, from primary, pre-K to high school graduation. It covers all the services there. And in the Girdwood Valley service area, the fees collected here stay in the valley. And so as I said, they pay for Parks and Rec, street maintenance, and the Housing and Economic Development Fund. And then those fees are only paid by the residents or property owners within the Girdwood service area for those fees. And like I said, in 24, we had the 5th lowest mill rate overall, and then Girdwood has the lowest mill rate as compared to other tax districts with similar government services, fire, police, parks and rec, and road and maintenance. And that comes off the mill chart attached there. So that is a quick overview. So here's the historical on the mill rate. we're up here right now in 24 and we're at 12.3 mil. To keep in mind was, I think in 16, it wasn't 16, is when we took on the police service. So you can see the bump there where it jumped in that aspect, and then it went up. One thing that has changed over the years is that we've seen more residential development, and we've also seen assessments go up on houses as the market here has gotten strong with real estate, and so our mill levy has kind of stayed around the same area because we've seen new houses and stronger evaluations of our homes here. So you can see along those lines. And then it compared to downtown, which is the most expensive tax district. So downtown, they're paying, close to 4 more mill rate and 4 more mills down there to cover their services in that aspect. So overall, we've had a historical of 11.99 for the service area. And you can see here, actually, our historical average has been negative for the area wide. So we've seen a few years where we have rebates and a few years where we've been paying. So it's so that aspect. And then the historical for the Girdwood service area has been 4.65. So those are kind of just that some historical numbers for the service area and our tax for overall. So that is sort of a quick run over before we jump into our first one. Any questions or comments associated with that?
I have a question. It's back on the with the program generated revenues. Did we do pretty well this time with program generated revenues?
We have done better now post COVID and also post the Halloween repairs from 3 years ago. We had to catch up because we used emergency reserves in that aspect. So, but we're kind of like where we historically have been.
Okay.
In that aspect. We do better when we have larger capital accounts, but we've spent down capital to purchase needed equipment and we build funds up, we buy it down, we have a new engine, working on some fish passages, things like that, such as how our capital funds, that really helps to generate interest for us. So
Thank you, Kyle.
Yeah.
I've got more of a comment observation. It's kind of interesting looking at the tax districts, the tax rates for different services across the uni as a whole. Comparing that table, comparing that to us. So when we look through there, obviously everyone has the same area wide. We're close to the amount that most, except for Chugach, most areas pay for fire. We're significantly less on what we pay for police. I mean, our mill rate's currently about just under 1 for police, as opposed to 3.6 everywhere else. We're pretty much the same as everyone else for Parks and Rec. We're about 0.65. And then roads, we're kind of in the middle between most LURSs and Anchorage Bowl. So we're kind of in the middle for roads. About the same for fire, massively lower for police, and similar for Parks and Rec. So it's really those two areas. And sorry, actually, there's parks as well. The parks isn't. Parks were about the same as most places, less than some. So it's really primarily in police and roads. We kind of sit between the rural area and the urban area. Yeah, it's kind of interesting to look at.
Especially with police in the urban area, it comes with much more specialized units, and crime inspections, detective units, all those things, crime gang units. So you see a lot more specialty, whereas we have more of a standard neighborhood policing model here as compared to what they have to have in Anchorage. So, and we're dependent on those organizations to help support us if we do have a major crime in that aspect. So, which we haven't had in significantly a long time.
Okay. For no further questions, we can move on to item number 2, which is fire department. Was there anything else to understand there?
No, I'm good.
So let's go to fire department, item 2.
If we could switch to the Word document or the PowerPoint PDF, that would be great.
Okay. Yep. Is that in the file?
I think it's just further down.
Okay. Sorry. Let me
Yeah, that's good.
rotate things around. All Right
There it
here.
is.
Okay.
I included this, I just first want to recognize that, two of our board members are here. Kara Edwards online and also Amanda Tuttle. So thank you for being here from the board. And then also our fire representative, Brianna. So, the board, met last week, also with Brianna and reviewed the revisions to the budget. And you'll see coming up that I've downgraded the budget from our first initial work session. I've added in Anchorage Fire was required to do budgeting for results this year and sort of put performance measures their staffing levels. So I've done an attempt at including those for us as well. What I thought was interesting was looking at if we scroll down, looking at the value of the protection area. And I don't have the call volume in there, I apologize, but looking at the value of the protection area, you can see that the value has gone up significantly in the last couple of years. And then if you look at the value of performance measures of civilian fire injuries and fatalities, we've done very well. I don't have Anchorage in here, and I might put Anchorage and Chudiak in here as a comparative. But just for us, we are looking very good on our civilian fire injuries and fire fatalities, and we can just scroll down. Firefighter fatalities and injuries also looking really good. Performance measure 3, what you can just scroll down just a little bit more, What was interesting was when I looked at this, usually what you find is in small communities, they have a higher number of fires in a larger community. So you would expect that our rate of fires would be higher than Anchorage, just because we're a small community. And what I found was when we did the national average for the communities based on us, this is for communities under 25,000, which we're kind of nearing that a bit more, but still, that we actually have a great rate of not having fires. So I think that's just a wonderful thing that we've never really talked about before. So I wanted to share that information. And then finally, just looking at property value saved. We didn't have a fire last year in our fire service area. We did have one in Portage, but that's out of the fire service area, so it doesn't count on this one. For this next year, we've had one in Indian, also outside the fire service area, and then dryer fire at the laundromat, and then also at the start of the year, there was one on Barron Circle. So it'll look different for 2024, but even that $3 million house on Barron Circle for that in the beginning of January, we managed to keep that at room and contents. So that would be within that percentage loss of less than 10%. So basically, for performance measure 4, you're basically saying you're going to try and keep it as a small property loss on the fire, stop the fire. And then finally, if you look at performance measure 5, outside fires that expand to greater than an acre, we've been able to do that as well. Although our fires are normally campfires, we haven't had any, we've been able to catch them and not have anything spread out. So abandoned campfire fires are what our outside fires generally are. Okay, so just want to go over that. Any questions on that before I
do really quick. Question on the 2023 column. Other ones said they weren't available yet, like TBD, but 0 means 0, because you already know that.
Yeah, because we
Right?
didn't have
They're
it.
0.
Yeah.
0%. Okay, got it.
Yeah, and then we're also going through ISO right now, which is directly impacts some people's insurance ratings. We're going through that we've submitted a bunch of paperwork, fire flow from AWW, our call volume, call stats, and that is September 9th. We are going to have the review on that. We're currently at 2.4, which is ISO rating of 2.4. So basically, the worse the number, the more expensive the taxes are, or the insurance is. Insurance.
How does 2.4 compare to, I don't know what scale that is?
We were much higher when I want to say we were like a 9 something when 6.9 when I first started here 20 years ago. So we've done significant work in terms of staffing. It's based on staffing, training, apparatus, water flow. So yeah, so things are good. I'm hoping we can retain our 2. So we did go through this review in 2018 or 19, and was 2019, and they based our numbers on the earthquake response. And at that point in time, we retained our 2-4, so. Yeah, but they can sometimes make you do water shuttles and they said there was, yeah, it's a thing, so. So, but it impacts everybody's, a lot of people's insurance, so you want to make sure that you. Also, what's happening lately is some people are going away from ISO and they're looking at basically losses against a zip code or the losses against a census tract. And so some people are moving away from an insurance rating and looking at that as a way to sort of quantify. So just some background knowledge. Yes.
Can I ask one more thing about this? So we don't have many fires here. Is that, I put it, one argument would be, why do we spend so much on fires?
Correct.
We don't have any fires. The other argument is a lot of the work you do is about education and preventing the problems occurring in the first place. So can you say something about?
Well, I would say if you looked at this year and we had that $3 million house that caught on fire on Barron Circle, right? That was called in and it was unoccupied. I believe it was occupied at the time, but I mean, that was a case of the fire department responded and isolated the fire just to the garage, which is where the point of origin, right? If we didn't have staffing in the station and, things were maybe different, that might have been a bigger loss in the community. And then that bigger loss would have spread out on everybody's insurance ratings for the next year forward. So there's that. Also the laundromat, when that had its little fire, this past year, we were able to keep that small. And so that was good because you can imagine, I think if we lost the laundromat where people get their water and also do their laundry, I think that would be sort of like critical infrastructure for a lot of Girdwood that don't have that. So, so I would say that, well, it does seem like, well, you're kind of like insurance policy. Do I really need you? When you need us, you need us. And it's hard to not be there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's half my answer to
Yeah.
the question. The other half was in terms of prevention itself. What are you doing in terms of
prevention? So for us, we don't have dedicated prevention staff. For us, we have PSAs on the radio station, on Glacier City Radio. Although I have not done one recently, doing turning in times articles, right? And then I do a lot of pushing through social media. And then pushing and then sharing information and then reposting. So I think that, and then also our firefighters, when they're in the community, are also doing outreach on that. So.
Thank you.
And we go to the schools once a year. Yeah. Behold, proposed fire budget for 2024. And again, this is just one part of the picture because we have also the EMS budget. The EMS budget is going to be holding flat, I was told, at 628 for this next year. So this is just part of it. What we are going to do is we have our next fire board meeting is we're going to do a quick comparison of 2023, 2024 budget to actuals to make sure that we haven't shortchanged ourselves. As we were talking and also wanting to remain under the 2.25 limit or around there to make sure that we're at 6 for our mill rate. One of the things, as we talked in the fire meeting the other day, is it is a little bit like rearranging deck chairs on a platform and making sure that we've kept it at a certain level and then reallocated funds as we can. This includes a 3% wage increase for firefighters and deputy chief. And that includes paid on call firefighters. We could roll downwards. Going down. Those below that number, the direct cost total, those the vehicle maintenance, capital contributions, engine fund capital loan payments, we don't really have very much control over those. And I'm hoping that our vehicle maintenance number will be lower this next year because, for one thing, we should have a new engine 41 We should have a new Rescue 41, so we shouldn't have the cost. Rescue 41 has had a lot of maintenance issues, just like our medic units were going in every second or third week for issues. Now they're in new chassis, although it's a different budget. I'm hoping that we won't be doing the swapping out as much because they're on new chassis. So, and then if we scroll down further, there's all this $445,149 of things that are attached to the fire budget that I have no control over, which is basically IGCs to Anchorage Fire Department. I did talk to Anchorage Fire, reach out to the fire chief and ask him if those would be the same number, if they were going up, if they were going down. And he told me it was a continuation budget. And so those would be the same or like the same next year. As I know from the past, they might change a little bit, but they didn't anticipate that there would be much changes in that. And as you can see there, the majority of that is going out of shop in terms of fixing things. Now, hopefully, again, well, because we won't have as many 20-year-old apparatus less next year. We will have two less 20 plus year apparatus. We should have, I would hope, see a reduction in our shop charges because we won't have as much. Now, that's not to say that when we don't get new equipment, new apparatus in, there's a time it has to spend at the shop before you actually see it. For example, the utility vehicles spent 6 months at the shop before we actually received them. So, there's that, but I'm hoping that that number will be reduced for the next year. And then the fire service fees revenue accounts, what that is when we go to City of Whittier or the Ephesa District, i.e. the Kenai Peninsula Borough on Seward Highway, we charge them out of area billing, and that's what comes back into that. And then additionally, if there's commercial fire alarms that exceed the threshold, those also can be charged. And then out of area fire responses to our friends in Bird, Indian, and Portage can also be charged. And then I guess we could scroll up if we have questions. I will say also for professional services for this next year, we are hoping to balance some of our professional services with working with the 4-acre group and having them help us with some financial services for this next year as a nonprofit.
Any questions? I just have one. Could you speak just briefly to the major differences between this and the budget we saw at the previous meeting?
I reduced down a number. I think I took out at least 100,000 in things. So I reduced the non-labor budget primarily.
Okay, non-labor. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions online?
And I don't know if our board might also want to talk. Possibly.
I'll give the opportunity for board members to make some comments if they wish to. That's 5 board members. All right, Amanda.
Yeah, no, I have really no comment other than the 2024 budget's not.
Sorry, I missed the last.
Not the 2024.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
If you have labor next, Chief Wilson, or not? Non-labor, or maybe they're for a different budget. Never mind.
Yeah. Labor's there.
Yeah. Different non-labor. Okay. Getting rid of more pages, but there.
It just looks smaller on the screen. It looks, it looked bigger the other day.
A lot of numbers the other day.
Thank you. Okay, we will move on to roads. Okay. Thank you very much. Good.
Okay, so roads for 2025, we are predicting for the 3% cost of living increase there, which has kind of been standard now for the last couple of years. So I reflected those numbers over the average increases that we've seen there. So you'll see there it's just about $5,000 increase overall in that personnel services, sort of the labor aspect. And this is where Margaret and I are paid out of this budget. And then for non-labor, I did include some things in here, office supplies. I mean, just trying to buy printer cartridges alone, it just got more expensive. And we've been at $2,000 for office supplies for 12 years. And every year we're creeping over that and having to use money out of the road budget to keep up with the office supplies. So we increased that just $1,000 there. And then I just bumped fuel up a bit as we've been bumping against that for years, but you know, we just don't know. It's sort of a different market out there. So brought that up to 3,000. The largest increase in this budget is right here in repair and supply and the repair and maintenance contracted. Our catch basin, basically our storm system needs to be cleaned every year. So we have a vac truck that goes through and cleans about 92 different catch basins throughout the valley. And that significantly jumped with the new bid rates. And so we paid $20,000 as just year before. Under an old contract, we were paying $7,500. So the new bids have come in significantly higher. Across the board, we've seen trucking just go up. And for example, I raised the amount needed to buy our calcium for dust control and then our E-chips for sanding in the winter. I just got the bid in yesterday or Friday for the E-chips for this winter, and it went up $10 a ton. Huge jump. And the reason for it is trucking has gotten so expensive because they're having such a hard time getting truck drivers. They're paying more to get drivers now. And so we're just seeing increases in that. So we may even need to reevaluate that after season. You know, if we have another heavy winter like we did last year, and we're still trying to we're trying to tackle critical drainage and road maintenance needs this summer. We're getting very tight on our budget because we've been at this $700,000 rate now for 3 years, and to do both winter and summer maintenance with $700,000, I tell you, I stretch the penny each direction, try to make it happen. So we're just seeing those inflation costs starting to catch us now, just buying materials to get things done around here. And then the other big jump for us was, and this was out of our control, but the last administration made a decision to significantly jump the fees on our rental rates for our vehicles. And so we basically pay a rental rate that pays off our vehicle and then covers the maintenance of the vehicle. So there's a shop in town dedicated to the light vehicles, and it went from $5,000 in 23 and jumped to $21,000. Now, one vehicle we did bring on full time because we've had such a hard time when we lose a vehicle or I lose a plow in the middle of winter. That plow could be out. Like last year, the plow was out for 5 months. Because of labor and part issues and things like that. So now I keep the seasonal truck that our seasonal guys run in the winter and the summer, and I keep it during the winter. One, it's backup for me, and then two, I don't have to fight to get another vehicle in the spring because there's a shortage of vehicles. And you might have heard the municipality for years has underfunded their vehicle program, and so now they're scrambling to replace police cars that are going on 20 years and trucks that are now into the 25th year of operation. So they're starting to catch up, but it's a bit of a scramble. So I think this is why you see this increase across the board as they're trying to refund that department. The other ones I tried to keep where they are. Keeping our capital contributions is key. You know, we do have a bid, and we have accepted a bid for the Davos project for the new fish culvert, but now we need to start saving up again to do the Mount Hood. So we're slowly trying to chop these projects off by saving up for them instead of doing bonding. And so another contribution next year will start going towards that project. It looks at this point, the Davos project probably will happen in the spring just because of the getting the contract signed and approved by the assembly, and then just the workload of everybody now at the end of summer going into fall, that it probably wouldn't be practical or even available to get the culvert that has to be specially made for this project. So but we have the funding set aside and it's all set up to go. So if we do, and it can happen, we'll do it this fall. If not, we're going to push it to the spring after breakup completes. And then our IGCs in this is just a carbon copy of what's going on this year. We've seen these numbers kind of move up and down. They did increase a little bit, actually decrease last year. So you can see from 23 to 24, they were pretty close in where they were that aspect. And that's just, we don't know what that is usually until the first quarter of the year. When they set IGCs by the finance department. And then overall, this budget is a $37,000 difference from last year, and we're looking at a mill rate estimation of 1.81 for it. So we're still fairly close to where we've been for years, and overall, it's not a significant jump, but it's more of the money we put into this account or this budget than we have in many years. It's because of the inflation costs. Any questions?
The
Go
question.
ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Kyle. Regarding the comment that came from our last meeting and acknowledging we had a really dry till June, and the comment was about the dust on roads, would the bump here in maintenance supplies qualify as that calcium chloride?
Yeah, so it wasn't a lack of not having the calcium chloride. It was a couple factors. One is that when we decide to do calcium chloride, it becomes a very large production. And so it takes wire truck, roller, grader, and then several guys. And so what we were delayed is that they were doing a traffic count on Timberline. And Timberline and Alley Escoview are two main roads that would probably get calcium first. And we wanted them to complete the traffic count. And as soon as they were able to get that, and as soon as I could get the crew free from wherever they were else in the state to come back and work here, we got people in there. And our goal was to have it done before 4th of July. And we did get it done, and they punched it out in one day. I think they worked a 14-hour day to do all the roads on the list and get them done. So yes, I know some people wanted to have it faster, but there were factors that we just couldn't push it faster. So, but yes, 32,000 there, or the 80,000 would help us with buying the calcium that we get each year.
Thank you for explaining that. I was not doubting the service or the lack of supplies or anything like that. And the weather was lining up perfectly for the wrong conditions.
Yes, and we've seen calcium steadily increase every year on bids. So so it's always a hit or miss as to how that's going to play.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so we'll move on to Parks and Rec.
So, and I didn't indicate this earlier, but where it is highlighted in yellow, that is where a change has happened compared to the year before. So at this point in time, we are going to keep our seasonal labor costs about the same. We may reevaluate that with you in first quarter. We have two really good local park caretakers right now. We'd love to get them back, and we want to continue to hopefully provide them a living wage. And so we will see if we can stay competitive to do that. We do compete against the resort, and these guys are our union, and they have to pay union dues. So we have to evaluate that at end of season. So we'll see where that goes, but we keep it the same right now. Operating supplies, I did increase for the skate park. Next year we do want to build a new battleship ramp in there. It's going to probably cost some with the steel. So we just increased that there. We did reduce the hand tram maintenance fees just over the last couple of years since it's been closed. We haven't had to do any general real maintenance out there with anything new. We have supplies on hand when we have to deal with issues out there while it's in its mothball state. So we reduced that by 500. And then some of the trail materials we reduced as well because we've been fortunate on grants and getting grants, and we'll continue to chase grants. So we feel we can reduce that amount there in that aspect. And then everything else is pretty much the same as last year. working within that area. We really do try to run after grants as much as possible for our different projects and special projects. And we have people who are very generous and want to donate. So we try to set that up as well. And then our nonprofit grants, we still have them at 60,000 for the coming year. And you can see the breakdown there. So I should have broke down. I'll do that for the next budget, put down what the grant amounts were from last year or for this year. So you have that as reference. And then the one increase here is 3,500 to hire a SCA or Alaska Trails crew to help for 10 days. We do have a match with 2 granting opportunities. So we hope to have trail crews here for much longer than 4 weeks. It would be nice to have upwards of 10 or 12 weeks and have them bouncing around to all our trails to help us with drainage and tread projects and just really, and also brushing. Once again, myself and the 2 crew members, we brushed Beaver Pond this year, and it'd be nice to have like 3 more people and it wouldn't take so much time. So we hope we can get more people to help us with that through these trail crews. And then one thing we are seeing is the increase in Instar dumpsters and rates along those lines. And so our public utility services, I feel like we should increase that by 2,000 there in that aspect. And then the capital contribution, keeping that the same. Our big project on the horizon is the suspension bridge to replace the hand tram. And so we're working through that. So we'll see where we're at once we get to final design and get a final estimate from the special estimators. So, and then IGCs, once again, carbon copy for this year. So overall, we're looking at a $15,000 increase. And based on 2004 assessments, we see a mill rate of 0.62. So, one thing to keep in mind with assessments is that usually we've been seeing assessments on properties go up each year. So that could lower our mill rates depending on what happens in 25 and what the Treasury comes out. So yeah, that's the overview for parks. Any questions?
Question, Kyle. Given the size and the priority of the bridge replacement, is that going to start showing up as a line item on the budget, you think?
Probably not in this budget because this is operating budget. That will definitely, I will keep you guys up to speed on the capital budget. Once we have we still have a goal of another 225 to 250,000 to raise.
Yeah.
And so this fall, once we get done with summer operations, we really want to focus in on a capital fundraising project through the winter to help bring those funds in. I just got an email. We just got the Rasmussen grant secured. So that helps towards our fundraising efforts, but we still have a 250,000 we'd like to raise. So we'll keep you up to speed on that capital project especially once we get to a solid estimate. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. A quick question, Kyle. I know it's because I think I mentioned it last time. The porta potties went up, but it's not yellow.
Oh, I might have missed highlighting that. Yes.
It's still in the total, right?
It is in the total.
Yeah.
Oop, did I go by it?
It's right above that.
Oh, yes. Yes. So, we've gotten significantly more porta potties over the last couple of years, and that price has creeped a bit based on contract. And so it's become a large expense for us. We probably have a dozen now, and more than that, maybe 15 throughout town that we maintain. And so that's part of the expense there. And they also get expensive. We have 2 ADAs, and so those can be twice as much. So yeah, it's been creeping, but we've seen good use of them. And they're good spots. Part of this fee also is pumping out the campground host weekly. So yeah.
Great, thank you.
I've got one kind of comment, I suppose, and I mentioned this last time. I'm not going to do it now because I'm not making a decision, but when we have our vote on this, I'm going to propose a slight change the way we do grants. I think the move to a fixed grant for Four Valleys was very successful. What I'm going to propose is we do the same with Little Bears and make that a fixed 10,000 a year. But then also increase effectively net increase of grants from 60,000 to 65,000, but take Little Bears out and give them a fixed 10. So that effectively means that there's a little bit more available for, it would go down to 30,000, we will have for all the non-profits, but there will be fewer people competing for that possibly. So that's a proposal I'll make. I want to say it now in case anyone had any thoughts on that. Barbara.
On that topic, I haven't seen applications come back in yet, but I have heard one group express interest that we haven't seen an application from. So just
Okay,
to
that's good.
let you know that things might not look the same as they ever and always have.
We'll have a very small net difference. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
If no further questions, we'll move on to the next one, housing and economic budget.
So let me switch screens here, and I did try to update the changes we received. Let me see if I can stop sharing here. Share here. This in the room, get bigger. Increase that size. All right, so I'll just give a brief, and then maybe Mike, I'll turn it over to you. But as you can see, in 24, there was a budget of $50,000 for the Housing and Economic Fund, and then the proposed for 25 is 80,600 with a line item for revenue. So, Mike, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah. So this was based on various discussions that have been happening. This is a guess and a starting point for, I think, something we could potentially put in the budget this year, and then we'll advise when it gets to first quarter budget revision. Last year we had 50,000, which was normally allocated towards a plan. Hopefully we'll be discussing this later, but I hope we actually get that plan moving, so we won't need anything for next year. This allocates. There've been several projects that people have been talking about. So we have, potentially land which we might acquire. There's potentially some pre-development work to do on that. There's studies in various things, including the RV park, gravel, things like that. So what I proposed was to have a line for, I'm going to call it pre-development work. So when we have some land control, we have some funds available for the kind of work that needs to be done to verify feasibility and to put enough information in to start looking for other funding sources. So that's a line item, an estimate based on what we've heard so far for a couple of projects. So that'd be 75,000 redevelopment. The other thing there's a lot of interest in is actually having potentially for next year, at some point next year, short-term rental regulations. It would be a very expensive thing if we were going to fund this all ourselves. There are third parties that provide services around this. So I estimated, based on a quote that I got a couple of years ago, I estimated what the costs might be for next year. The reason this was delayed is I was trying to get an updated quote, but they couldn't provide that. So that 39,600 is an estimate for what it would cost to run a kind of full regulatory stack, which would be application through to tracking information for enforcement. Enforcement itself would be done by the municipality, but everything up to the point of identifying enforcement issues would all be done by a third party, and that would be approximately 40,000, assuming this sort of scale of short-term rentals we have now, which is about 370 active. And because of the way that charging works, they look at the total number of listings across different platforms, and then it gets collapsed down to the number that you use. So the two parts of payment, we might go into, but don't have to though. Basically, the summary is about 40,000 a year to run that. One of the numbers I heard, again, this is based on estimate, there are 370 actual short-term rentals in Girdwood, which is what market data currently shows. I used it, there have been a number of numbers thrown around, but I used $100 as a nominal permit fee. So assuming we're doing this under our power, that revenue would come to this budget. The cost would also be in this budget, and I allocated 3,000 for additional IGCs that might come through as well. So that was my estimate. What this does is basically we would run a short-term rental tracking and regulation through a third party, get the fees from the permit fees, which roughly offset each other, and then have an additional 75,000 for pre-development work across any of the sites we get control over or management control over during the next 12 months. And if we don't get control, we're not spending that 75,000, it would move towards, it would sort of basically roll on to the next year. So that's a starting point. And what I'd like is, before we actually have to make a decision on this, we have another housing and economic development committee meeting. So I want them to look at this as well and see if they have any additional suggestions before we actually make any decisions at our September meeting. I think in the packet, in the online packet, you had the second page that shows some details of where the estimate comes from.
I updated the new packet with both of the items that you just slide. So if we should.
If there's any questions about where that estimate comes from, we can go into it, but that's roughly what I allowed for a 15% cost increase, and then use the numbers we have now for how many, the market numbers we have now for how many short-term rentals are.
So this is the new information.
Yeah, so that lower part is okay, for a smaller scale and 2021 numbers. It was about 25,500 was the estimate, which would be providing an online portal for permitting and registration, monitoring compliance, identifying where they are from the online listings, running a hotline 24/7, and then also monitoring the actual rental activity. The last one is necessary if you want to do tracking on enforcement. So we're plugging in our estimated numbers now and a 15% normal increase. That's what we come up with. Any questions?
Are we rolling, is that $50,000 going to be used at all this year?
Well, we'll have that discussion later on
Okay.
in our next meeting.
Thank you, Mike.
I can't see if there are any questions.
Jennifer.
Any hands up online. Jennifer.
Yeah, actually, I just wanted to circle back connected to the question that was just asked. I think I also want to circle back around to something that kind of slipped out earlier on. That, just to clarify, I have been through the minutes repeatedly from the 50,000 we approved last year, and that absolutely was not tied to any specific project or anything else, though it was mentioned the possibility of doing a study. My understanding from both the minutes and having sat through it was that it was not specified. So I see that money is still being up in the air and undesignated.
Thank you. Don't see any other questions. Okay, so we'll move on to police.
Okay, so police, our contract amount is set for next year. This will be our third year of the contract for 25. And so in the first 3 years, we're set at 793,000. If we do extend for year 4 and 5, it does go up into, I think, the low 800,000s or mid 800,000s for year 26 and 27. But what's in front of us is year 25. And so the only increase I show here is actually for the ACS building. We do want to do some tenant improvements in there to help with security for Whittier Police in the substation here in Girdwood. One is putting in a real door to separate the ACS workspace from the police space. Right now, we just use a chain, and we have officers who stay here every night, and they've had sometimes people walking in on them. And they actually work night shift, and so they sleep during the day. So anyways, and then a better station for testing for alcohol impairment and things like that downstairs, which ACS has agreed to. So we are right now finally getting to a final agreement with them on ACS for that. And then so that 6,000 would be paying off those tenant improvements over 3 years for the contract. And if we do end early, we just make a lump sum payment to pay off those improvements. So, and then, the line items in here is car and towing and missing police. We actually do a lot of impounding and a lot of abandonment. And especially this year with the encampments, we had a lot of vehicles to tow, so that covers those fees there. And then we also have standby towing for major events for Forest Fair, Slush Cup, New Year's, those being the major ones. So those expenses come out of that $12,000 there. And then we have all kinds of different things there. So anyways, overall, we see a $6,000 increase for this budget going from 811 to 817.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, let's go on to capital budget.
So capital budget, what we're proposing is similar to last year for our two big contributions go to Parks and Rec for our capital budget. And I'm sorry, I should put in a column here for fire as well. Have that.
I think it just.
Oh, it got cut off. There it is. So it just got cut off. It's so funny trying to get Excel to go into a PDF document. It's very difficult. And so you can see here what we're at there. So that's the lifespan of how much we put into capital over time and in the different ways. With the fire department, we've had success way back when with a bonding, which paid for engine 41. And it took us 20 years to pay it off. And so by the time we paid it off, we were getting another engine 41. And so we're taking a different approach this year to save up for it and then make large capital payments towards it, which you can see here. And since we haven't taken delivery of engine 41 yet, we have pulled money for that, and we are putting that aside to make those payments and make even a larger down payment on that engine when it comes in, which most likely look like it's going to be January 25. So this is just give you how much money we've collected over the last couple of years, since 17 for capital funds. So let's start with fire. Loan payment will be the biggest one, and we've caught up on a lot of the big capital purchases for the fire department. There will probably be smaller ones like turnouts and respirators or something like that will come up for the fire department. But for the most part, we've caught up on we've gotten new chief and utility rigs. We have a new Rescue 41 coming through an area-wide bond, a new 41 engine, which is hopefully starting production and coming. So those are some of our heaviest use vehicles out there. And then the other ones would be the ambulances, which are covered by area-wide. And as Chief said, new chassis and new the boxes were refurbished and put back on. They look great. You get a chance to go over there. They have a new color scheme. They look pretty cool. So check that out. Parks and Rec. So our big thing right now is we're working through the bridge design. That's funded. We have a commitment from the service area of $500,000 to go towards the construction of the bridge, and we're matching that up with money we raised from the state. We've gotten money from the U.S. Forest Service. Now we've gotten money from the Rasmussen, and we're still working on other capital fundraising for that project in that area. So right now we have basically a balance of about $409,000 in there undesignated. And please ignore this comment. That doesn't have to do with this. And so we'll continue to grow that account. I think the next big thing is one is get this bridge done, and then two, park planning, master planning for this park and Moose Meadows Park. and get that so we have direction on where we want to go with improvements and maintenance of facilities for the future, get understanding what the community wants for their parks. And then we have right now in this room, we have 47,000 in reserve for capital needs. We just did the upgrade last year of the AV system in here. So that was a good investment. So overall, we have about 1.1 million sitting in that account assigned to different areas. And then street maintenance, we have taken most of the money that we have available right now in street maintenance, and we put it towards this Alyeska Creek project. We were unfortunately not stoked about what we're seeing for construction costs nowadays, but the low bid came in, and we ended up with a project around 847,000. The original estimate 2 years ago was in the high fives. But I was preparing myself for this because what I'm seeing across the board for construction costs right now, we're seeing things go up. And then we also have purchased gravel that's sitting out at Bird Point right now, and that will be coming in. So we really only have about 18,000 available right now in our undesignated account for roads. Everything else is tied to projects. And after we get done with Davos, the next one is Mount Hood. And that will really fortify the drainage output of Alyeska and Moose Creek in that low-lying neighborhood over there. So we've been trying to work through those projects for probably about 8-9 years, just trying to get the money to save up for it. So I'm glad to see we're getting through 2 out of the 3 projects there to make that work. We do have a little bit of funds left with cemetery, $2,300 there. And then you can see here overall our contributions in 24, and they're still similar for 25. It'd be 678,000 going to capital accounts for fire, parks and rec, and streets. All any questions?
Jennifer?
Yeah, Kyle, I had a question about that. It looks like around $300,000 increase in the Davos Fish Passage, which I understand what you're saying about being able to see that one coming. But I just had a question about how much, if any, of that project or that kind of project can ever be covered by grants, or are grants really more the province of things like the Winter Creek Bridge, and we have to do all of this consistently out of capital budget?
So fish culverts have been a real frustrating thing. We've chased 2 different state grants that we've been encouraged to chase, and the grant writing process on these are pretty exhausting because you just have to come up with so much detail. And that's why we funded all the plans in advance, that we had the complete plan set and everything. And we've not been successful. We found like it's almost like they put it out there as a carrot, and they're required by law to advertise this to everybody, but then they still have the choice to retain it. And what I mean by that, the DOT controls these fish grants. So we just haven't been successful because they don't see Alyeska Creek as a vital fish passage. But we do get fish in there, so we have to build the fish standards. Most of we get in there is pinks, and they come in there and they die out. It's hard to say if they're actually spawning in there. But they do come in, so they do have to get to it. So yeah, no, it's been a very tricky one to get funding for. Whereas the suspension bridge, we've been more successful there because that's something that is a favorite of recreation, and so people have more interest because they know they can use it and it's a big part of their recreational activities. Fish culverts aren't the same way.
Thank you. That's what I thought I remembered, but I appreciate the reminder.
And the other thing that I tried to do was to run this Davos project through our term contract with Western, because last year we did the Lake Tahoe fish culvert with them, and we had an engineer estimate on that of almost to 240,000, and Western was able to do it for 187,000. But due to the larger sum of the project, purchasing wouldn't support that method. And so I knew instantly our costs were going up 25% because we have to go through the purchasing method, and then we have to go through our project management method. And so we actually have in this $850,000, I would say that we have 200,000 maybe or less in soft costs that we're paying to engineers, project managers, purchasing department, inspectors, things like that, that get lost when we could do it more efficiently. So it's just the way the code is set, and it's also sometimes the way the director feels about how these things work.
Okay, can you go back to the table of capital contributions?
Way up here.
That one, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been looking at this because it's kind of an interesting situation. So we used to pay, go back to 2017 or so when these numbers start. We used to be making contributions of around 7% of our budget were effectively capital contributions. And now we're sitting around 14-15%. So obviously our budget has gone up a lot, and the percentage of budget for capital has gone up a huge amount. And partly that's because, you know, as we've discussed, we've been getting more and more infrastructure over the years, and you know, we have to as a service area. You know, often the infrastructures come from grants, but we as a service area have to pay for the maintenance of that and pay for the replacement of it. So some of this is just due to the fact that community has grown. A lot of the money has come in for capital expenditure from outside, and now that's not happening. So we're having to take a bigger part of that ourselves.
And I think another factor in is that the state used to be flushing capital dollars, and we had lobbyists down there that brought, I mean, Egloff, Town Square, Olympic Mountain. Those were all big capital projects that came from state money. And some years you might see a little bit of capital come out of there, but for the most part, it's not very strong.
That's right. There's not much coming from elsewhere. And the last thing is, you know, we haven't had success in bonds since probably since the fire department, the previous engine. It's just not something which seems to be available to us at the moment in the service area.
You know, the other thing they don't talk about is bond is that there's a lot of hidden costs just to get a bond on a ballot. And so you actually will pay a lot of money up front, hopefully get a larger return out of a bond. But then you pay it, if you do steadily pay it over 20 years for a service area like ours, we start to have issues about, well, when can we do the next bond and afford the next bond? So it's almost the same pace of saving money slowly versus bonding and not trying to drown the taxpayers in debt payments.
Yeah. The other thing that's kind of interesting, general big picture, is the municipality has a lot of reserves and a lot of money from, you know, MLP sales, various other things. A lot of that is invested in bonds in the lower 48. And then when we order the bond, we're paying all this money up front and all the costs up front to the bond attorneys and everything else to create the bond, to borrow the money. So we have this weird thing of we're investing a lot of our own capital at a municipal level in the lower 48 and then having to pay additional costs when we want to invest in ourselves, which is kind of an interesting structural problem. So I think what I was going to lead on to is the intergovernmental loans approach that you've been taking recently. I think is actually extremely powerful. We're still ending up paying a lot for capital, but that as a mechanism is a very effective.
And I found a good positive of that intergovernment loan. And we bought Engine 40. We started Engine 41's production. We had to put down $800,000 up front. And so we worked with finance to take this intergovernment loan. And what's nice about it is we pay nothing on it until the engine gets delivered. And so once the engine gets delivered, then we start paying a payment just like an auto loan at an interest rate. But we can put the money up front and the city's not charging us for it. And then once the engine gets delivered, we can pay it. So what it allows us to do is hopefully save some money up so we can put a larger down payment down on it and reduce the amount of debt that we have on it and pay it off faster. So I hope the service area can continue to do that going forward and see how it figures out. So.
Yeah, I mean, that approach has saved our bacon.
Yes.
Any other comments? Okay, if not, we will move on to public comment. Persons offering public comment, state the full name and address. Public comments limited 3 minutes per person on topics which are not listed on the agenda. Anyone want to make public comment? Anyone in the room or online? In that case, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. We are adjourned.
It's
Thank you very much. See you in 50 minutes. 40 minutes.